So hey, we're going to be in Matthew chapter 17. We're ending this series on We're going to start in verse 14. I'll also be in Mark chapter 9 today. If you don't have a Bible, we'd love to get one in your hands because we believe the Bible is extremely important to our lives and that it challenges us and shows us the way to live. Here we are, Matthew 17:14. It says, when the crowd came, a man approached Jesus and he knelt before him and he said, "Please have mercy on my son. He said he has seizures and he is suffering greatly, and he often falls into the fire and into the water. I brought him to your disciples, but they could not heal him." Jesus, I love it when Jesus gets frustrated because he just says it like it is, and typically he's speaking to people like me. But in this moment he says this. He's so frustrated. He says, "You unbelieving and perverse generation." Can I pause? This is so cool. The word that Jesus uses, perverse, is not the way that we think about it. But the way that Jesus uses it is like if you were to turn your contact inside out, if you wear contacts and flip it inside out and put it in your eye, it's painful and you can't see where you're going. That's what Jesus is saying in this moment. He's saying, "You unbelieving, can't sing generation." He says, "How long do I have to put up with you? How long do I need to stay with you?" You ever said that to your kids? How long do I need to put up with you? Just me, guys. Just me, I guess. I'm talking to my kids over there. Jesus rebukes the demon, and it came out, and the man was healed at this moment. And then the disciples came to Jesus in private. They said, "Why couldn't we drive out the demon?" And Jesus replied, "Because you have little faith. Truly, I tell you, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you." Nothing will be impossible for you. Hey, I know that we talked about fun suckers at the beginning, but I changed the title of my message because nobody wants to talk about people who suck the life out of you for the next 30 minutes. So today I want to talk with you about being dangerous people. Becoming dangerous people. Anybody get excited about living a dangerous life? In the words of the Cleveland Brown quarterback, he said, "I woke up feeling dangerous today." Ain't nobody here a Cleveland Browns fan. So do me a favor, would you turn to three people on the way to your seat, high five them, and say, "Faith is fun. Faith is fun, and you can have a seat." So I'm going to start talking, and you know the people that I'm talking about. You've all had those people who every time there's something amazing that happens, they can always point out the negative in the situation. You've had the people who you could accomplish something amazing in your life. You've accomplished something, but they could still find the shortcoming. Yeah, you had a good game, but you should have ... Who cares that you had a hat trick? You should have done this. We've had the people in our lives who not only see the glass half empty, but they always see it continually empty. It is fully empty. There's not a drop of water in that glass. They're the people that when you ask them how they're doing, they will give you a list of everything that's wrong with their life. Yep. They're the people who, when you go, they could take a perfectly good birthday party and make it miserable. Why? Because it's their party and they can cry if they want to. It's bad. Just to let you know, I am the king of dad jokes, and I'm proud of that. But maybe you have a student who they think their world is ending because you've asked them to turn off the technology and take 30 seconds to take out the trash. Maybe you're the parent who thinks their kid is the worst, when in reality, your kid is just acting like a kid. A kid, that's what kids do. That's what normal teenagers do. They're just acting like a kid, but you think they're the worst. Some of you've had this experience where somebody who is beautifully seasoned talks down to you and calls you porcelain and says that you have no grit because somehow you didn't wear bread bags as shoes and walk 5 miles uphill to school in the snow. Are you with me? You ever had that person talking to your life? "You don't know what I've been through." Oh, zip it, bro. Zip it. Like we've all had those people who when you're laughing, when you're cracking up jokes, when you're celebrating, when you've got something good going on in your life, they walk into the room and you can feel the weight of them when they come in. Can I say this, church? They are not just fun suckers. They are not fun suckers, but they are cynics. Some of us haven't caught on to this yet, but cynicism is a disease. And a lot of times we talk about people who are skeptics and we talk about people who are cynics, and a lot of times we think those terms are synonymous, but they're completely different. In fact, I've come up with my own terminology today. I believe there are smart skeptics, and then I believe that there are dumb skeptics. Am I allowed to? I'm going to say dumb. Is that okay? Nobody's okay. We have smart skeptics and dumb skeptics. Here's how I define skeptics. Skeptics are the people who pose questions, but they are still open to the possibilities. Skeptics are the people who are like, hey, I don't fully get what you're doing, but help me understand. That's what they say. Help me understand. If you could just explain it a bit more. I don't know where you're going, but I think I know what you want. Like, those are skeptics. They have questions, but they're open to the possibilities. But then there are the dumb skeptics. And the dumb ones are the ones who've crossed the line. Everybody say, cross the line. Cross the line. You guys are with me today. This is so good. If you're online watching, just put it in the chat. Cross the line. We're going to come back to this in just a second. But the dumb skeptics cross the line from skepticism into cynicism. And here's what cynics do. They pose themselves as people who are interested in virtue. In fact, cynics are often like these thinkers. They're brooders. They're the existentialists, and they're the philosophers in life who think deeply about things. And we think that they're smart, but the reality is cynics just strip away everything that has value. See, what cynics do is they will take norms and they will take truths and they will take beliefs, things that we know are true, and they will strip them down to the bare bones of what it is, and they will take away the value. They will deprive those things of the oxygen that they're deserving of. I wonder if you in your life, we had a lot of honest people in our 9 a.m. I wonder if you have ever been a cynic. Anybody? We got a few honest people in here. I wonder if you've ever found yourself at a place where you watched the news. It doesn't matter what channel. But you think all news is fake news, no matter how many witnesses there are to the event. Some of you in here today, you still believe that Neil Armstrong did not land on the moon, that it all happened at Area 51. And some of you in here have security clearances to let us know whether that's true or not. But don't do that, because we know what happens when you let secrets out. Some of us, we believe that God's best is not in front of us, but the cynics believe that God's best is behind us. Cynics believe that everything and everyone is out to get them. I have a small dose of cynicism in my life. In fact, if you were to come to me and hand me an energy drink or a healthy drink and say, this is healthy, you know what I'll do? I'll flip that sucker around and I'll start reading the ingredients. And you know, I'll be like, nope, causes dementia, causes bloating, is bad for your gut. Oh, and this one causes cancer. If you just ask me, everything causes cancer. I am cynical about everything that we put in our bodies, and maybe that's a bad thing. But cynical people don't have friends. Cynical people don't have anyone that wants to be around it. Cynical people take everything that is beautiful and good and they hold it in contempt to the point that they become jaded. See, jaded is a whole nother level. Because the moment that you become jaded, you become apathetic, you become passionless, you become lazy. Here's what I know about jaded people is when you are jaded, you have this sense within your soul that you are empty. If I could just say to you today that it is okay, some of you have a right to be jaded. You've been through experiences in your life. You've been hurt, you've been abandoned, you've been wrong, you've been through sickness, you've been through loss of somebody that you love dearly, and you have this moment where everything around you looks gray, and you do have the right to be jaded. But here's what I know: if you just let that sit within your soul over time, what happens is you just start walking away from friends. You start walking away from family. You walk away from your jobs. Most of you, maybe some of you, when we become jaded, we walk away from faith. And the tendency for us, when we are cynical, is we walk away from God. Listen, I'm really interested in your family and your friends. But as your pastor, the thing I'm interested in the most is your faith. Because I believe everything that you do flows from the faith that is inside of you. In fact, Jesus talks about cynics and skeptics today, and I know that we don't see it explicitly in the text, but I need you to know I've done my homework. Like I've studied really hard for this message and gone through every single word over and over and over again just to make sure that I was right. But he's addressing the cynic because he knows if you have cynicism in your life and you're jaded, it will rot leaders, it will rot communities, it will rot churches, it will rot you from the inside out. And so I want to go back to the account in Matthew 17 verse 14. And I want you to notice the shift that Jesus makes within the story. It says, when he came to the crowd, a man approached them. Let me go verse to 17. I don't need to go to verse 14. Let's go to verse 17. Jesus says to the people, he says, you unbelieving and perverse generation. How long should I put up with you? How long do I have to stay with you? He says, bring the boy. And so Jesus rebuked the demon and the boy was healed. Then the disciples came to Jesus and they asked him in private. Why couldn't we cast out the demon? And what does Jesus say to him? He said, it's because you have such little, what does he say? Faith. The big misconception that I make when it comes to belief and faith is oftentimes I think they are the same, much like skeptics and cynics. But there is a massive difference between belief and faith. And that's why Jesus makes the movement in verse 17 from unbelief to when he talks to his disciples, he says, you have little faith. And the word that Jesus uses almost sounds like an Italian dish. He says, agalapistos. Isn't that fun to say? Agalapistos, my friends. And what he is saying to the disciples in this moment is he says, you have refused to act in accordance with the calling that I've placed on your life. Oh, this is good. He said, disciples, I put a calling on your life and you have refused to act in accordance with that calling. How many times has God asked you to do something? Maybe he said, hey, I need you to call this person and just say you're sorry. And you're like, that's a good idea, God. And then you never make the phone call. Has there ever been a time in your life where God says, I need you to take a really big risk? Really big risk. I want you to step out in faith. I want you to do something crazy in your life. Maybe he's asking you to start a new business or leave your old job and you're like, okay, God, I hear you. But then you just stay in the comfort of your old job. You refuse to act on the calling that God has put in your life. See, this is what Jesus is addressing as their faith. And I need you to see the difference between the two. I'll say it like this. Belief is based on information, but faith is built on application. Oh, this is important. Make sure you mark this down. Make sure you know, if you're not taking notes, put it in your head. Take a picture of this. This is so important. Belief is based on information, but your faith is built on application. If I could say it like this, how many of you are afraid of heights in here? Okay, we got a good number of you. Thank you. Welcome to the club. I'm afraid of heights as well. In fact, when my kids go to Kings Island or when they go to Cedar Point or when they love going to ride the roller coasters, for me, there's this fear of getting on a roller coaster. But here's the oddity of that, right? I know and I believe that the roller coaster is safe. I know it. I believe it. I think the engineers have they have the best for me intent when they make the roller coaster. Now, here's the thing. I believe it, I know it, and here's how I know it is because I've done a little research on roller coaster riding. You are more likely to get struck by lightning than you are to die on a roller coaster. In fact, your chances are 1 in 16 million. 1 in 16 million. So you're telling me there's a chance, right? Every year, only 4 people die on roller coaster rides, and 60% of those who die are because patrons are acting like idiots. Listen, just follow the rules and you won't die. And so I hear these stats and I'm like, won't get, like less than getting struck by lightning, Only 4 people die a year. There's pretty good chances that I'm gonna be safe. I know it, I believe it. But it isn't until I stand in line for 3 hours, staring at the top of the hill, feeling like I'm gonna pee myself, that I begin to act in faith. Sorry, I know that was graphic, but it's just true. It isn't until I get in the cart and I put on the belt, the seat belt and the lap bar, and I pull it down, and I'm always wondering, like, is this thing really gonna stay down? Is this thing gonna hold me? When we get inverted and we go upside down and we're doing corkscrews, like, is this really going to keep me in? It isn't until you pull that thing down that you start having faith. It isn't until you start going up the hill and you hear a clack, clack, clack. This is the worst feeling, isn't it? It's the worst feeling, and you're looking out left and right, and then you get to the top of the hill and you're like, just go. But instead, what do they do? They hang you there forever, and you're like, no. But it isn't until I'm on the ride that I'm acting in faith in this moment. And what I know is that when you get done with the ride, what I love about the ride is you know that it's safe, but man, you feel like you are dangerous. You get off that ride like, bro, I could conquer the world. Let's do that again. Is that how you feel when you get up? I'm dangerous. But when it feels dangerous, that's what makes it so much fun. It's when you have faith. Faith is so much fun. Why? Because it's dangerous. If you're like, Brad, I haven't ridden a roller coaster in 20 years. All right, well, I'll give you another example. Let's talk about Top Gun for a minute, because you probably were born in the 80s, and you're old. Last night, I acted out this whole scene, and it was like Andy Dwyer on Parks and Rec and the Rambo scene. Did the whole thing. Not gonna do that today. I'm gonna save you. But back in Maverick, one of my favorite scenes is the moment where they're sitting in the airplane hangar and they have all the new pilots sitting in their seats, and they bring in this expert from the Pentagon to talk to them about all the information that she knows about the MiG-28. You remember this scene? And it's the scene where Maverick starts pushing back, and he's like, I know that you know it. I know that you know it. I know you have all the information that you need about the plane, but he says, I'm telling you, I know that it can do more. And when I look back on that scene, what I realize is you have somebody who has all the information about the plane, but they don't know what the plane can do because they never tested the limits of it, and they've never flown it. They didn't have faith. They didn't live on it. In fact, the better scene is when they're in the locker room, which is really weird, and they're all arguing in towels, but they are essentially saying, Maverick, you are so unsafe up there. And I love what he says as he gets in people's faces. He looks at him, he says, that's right. I am dangerous. I am unsafe. What makes me dangerous is I fly the plane in a way that nobody else wants to fly. I have faith when up there. I have confidence up there. That's right, I am dangerous. And I don't know about you, church, but within me, I want to be a kind of people, and I want you to be a kind of follower that says, that's right, I am dangerous. I am dangerous in my faith. See, here's what happens to us. I'm gonna probe for just a minute. You can hate me for a second, but don't hate me in a few minutes after we get out of this. What I often find is that a lot of times in our faith, we mix up belief and faith, and what happens is we think belief is dangerous when really belief is just deep. I've met Bible, I've met Bible-believing Christians who know the word, they've memorized the word, they can recite it to you. If you're in a moment's notice, they got a verse that they can pull out of their back pocket. They know it, and yet they've never made an impact in somebody's life. They've never made a difference. You see, the moment that you do the word is the moment that you become dangerous. And I love that we don't call it the knowing word, we call it the living word, because when you live the word, you start living by faith. Jesus says it this way in the end of Matthew chapter 6. He says, if you know the word, but you don't do the word, he says, you are building your house on sinking sand. But he says, if you know the word and you do the word, he says, you are building your house upon a rock. When you know the word and you do the word, you become dangerous people. Church, I want to be the kind of person that lives out their faith in such a way that people look at me and say it's unexplainable, it's unconventional, it's radical, it's inverted, but it's a kingdom-minded life where people look at you and say, man, he's dangerous. And I say, that's right, I am dangerous. I am dangerous because I follow Jesus, who is the Most High God, who has put a calling on my life that is too important for me to sit back in weakness and soak in information, but rather I'm meant to step out into the future, disciple others, and change lives. Church, this is why God says you can say to the mountain, if you have faith, move from here to there and it will do it. And we don't even think about that. We just kind of skip over that phrase like, yeah, I can move mountains. No, you can't. It's impossible. You ever tried to move a mountain? I can't even move a boulder. But Jesus says, if you have faith, everything will be possible. Nothing will be impossible for you. See, it is by faith. It is by faith that God raises up leaders to live out their calling and their purpose. It is by faith that you can impact the world around you. You can't impact the world when you're sitting at home. It is by faith that you begin to win the battles that you're facing in your life, that God is going to help you win those battles. It is by faith that you can rise up over the substance abuse and the codependency with God's help. It is by faith that you can step into and get clarity about the future that God has for you. It is by faith that you can become spiritual giants in such a way that the enemies and the evil forces of this world have no hold on you, because you keep stepping and you keep moving. And when you have faith, you become dangerous people. And I'm telling you, when you become dangerous, that's when it gets fun. Yo, if your faith, if God is boring to you, you must be serving the wrong God. Because when you step out in faith, God will call you to something that is so scary, but it'll be so exhilarating at the same time. I want to go back to Matthew chapter 17, verse 17. One more time. I'll read it again to you. I know we've read it 2 times, but this is the third. Jesus says in the story, he says, you unbelieving and perverse generation, how long do I have to put up with you? And then at the end, the disciples ask him in private, why couldn't we drive out the demon? Why couldn't we do it? Why couldn't we do it? Why couldn't we do it? Here's why they couldn't do it, church. Remember at the beginning, we talked about smart skeptics and dumb skeptics? The disciples made a dumb move. They crossed the line from asking questions to a point where they became jaded and cynical in their faith. Here's how I know that. In the very beginning, when they're following Jesus, and the disciples are full of questions in his ministry. Jesus would share a parable that nobody understood, and they would meet him in private, and they would say, hey, what did you mean by that? Or Jesus would do something that didn't make sense to them, like hanging out with a woman who's had 5 husbands at the well. And they come back and they're like, Jesus, what were you doing? Why did you do that? Explain this to us. Help us understand this. Help us make sense. Why would you do this? And often what we found with the disciples is they were filled with questions, but they were open to the possibilities. In fact, the word that Jesus uses for people who have unbelief is not a bad word. We feel really guilty when we hear this word unbelief, but the word Jesus uses in this moment means you can have questions and still be converted. You can have questions in your life and still be following Jesus. How many times in your life, can I ask you, do you start having questions about where is God? Why isn't he around? Why isn't he healing? When is he going to show up? Why is his timing so bad? You ever ask those questions? And then you feel really guilty about asking those questions. And because you're asking those questions, you feel like you're stepping away from your faith. I need you to hear this today. I believe that the people who ask the most questions make the greatest Christians. And Jesus says it's okay to have unbelief in your life. I can work with unbelief. In fact, if you flip over to Mark chapter 9, Verse 22, this is what it says in verse 22. The Father says, the demon has thrown him into the fire. It's thrown him into the water. And then he says to Jesus, but if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us. I love Jesus. He looks at me and says, what do you mean if I can do anything? What do you mean if I can do it? He says, everything is possible if you simply believe. And then the Father says something that I resonate with almost every single day. He says, listen, Jesus, I believe, but help me with my what? My unbelief. I believe that you're the Messiah. I believe that you can do it, but I still have questions about how you're going to get there. I believe you're the one who can heal my son, but I'm not certain that he can be healed. Like I still have doubts. I still have questions. I'm a skeptic about what you can and what you can't do. And that's not the problem that Jesus has, because guess what? In his unbelief, he still heals the son. The problem he has is not with unbelief. The problem he has is with his disciples. Because the disciples have crossed the line, become jaded in their faith. You're like, how do you know that? Because ironically, the same story in Mark chapter 9 that we read in Matthew ends differently. The disciples ask this question. They say, why couldn't we drive out the demons? And Jesus says this. He says, the only way that this demon could be driven out is by prayer. It's by prayer. I know we don't get very motivated by prayer, but when I think about the disciples, prayer is not information. Prayer is not something that you know. Prayer is something that you do. I believe that prayer is the greatest act of faith you can do every single day when you wake up. Why? Because when you wake up in the morning, you are praying to this mystical, uncertain, I don't know, I can't feel, I can't hear kind of God, and you're just shouting out with all the faith that you have, God, this is my prayer today. That is an act of faith every single day. Oh yeah, come on, I feel it. You're there. But then when God doesn't answer, what happens? We stop praying. We stop losing not belief, we stop losing faith. We stop acting upon what we know. We stop acting upon what we believe. We stop acting out in faith. This is the problem for disciples. Jesus says, he says, you haven't prayed. You see, the disciples had been given the power by God. He gave the authority and the power to heal people and cast out demons. But they did not know how to appropriate the power of God because they stopped praying. They stopped acting in faith. In fact, if I could say it this way, they became unresponsive. They became unresponsive. Where in your life, church, have you become unresponsive? I know sometimes we think when we're unresponsive, we're just dead and we're sitting still, but unresponsive shows up in these little ways in our lives. You are unresponsive if you like to sit behind a keyboard and write divisive comments that get lots of shares, but make absolutely no impact in people's lives. We become cynical and unresponsive when we put labels on people and we point out their failures without acknowledging our own. We become unresponsive when we believe that it's better to stay isolated and in the darkness of our own apartment than it is to step out into the corner and find the surprise that God has for us in front of us. Can I say we've become unresponsive to our children, and so we just stop looking up for our phones and asking them how they're doing and what they're going through because you don't believe that you have anything to offer them. Some of us, we are unresponsive because we like to stay at work. Because you realize that if you go home, your marriage is so broken, it's going to take more work to fix your marriage than it is for you to stay at work and continue your working hours that you know you don't even need to work. We become unresponsive. Some of us have become unresponsive to the world. Like you believe in God, but you look at the world, you say, oh, the world's bad. Just to be clear, God created the world and he looked at it and he said, this is good. But we believe it's bad. We look at everything that's wrong with it. And what happens is you believe in God, and so what you say is, God, I'm just going to wait till you come back. I'm going to wait till I die, and I can't wait to be in heaven with you. And I'm not saying heaven's a bad thing. I'm just saying if that's your response to the world, then you're just as apathetic and indifferent as the atheist sitting next to you. This is too much. Man, that's quiet in here. Unresponsive, like I think about people who have stopped showing up to church because they've gone through something at another church and like, wow, it's just gonna happen again. They're gonna hurt me, they're gonna mess it up, and so I'm just gonna stop showing up. I think the mediocrity of our lives, maybe it's affluence, maybe it's comfort, but we become unresponsive to what God wants to do because we love living in the comfort of what we have. Do you know why the disciples couldn't cast out the demon? It's because they stopped showing up. Where in your life have you stopped showing up? I love that in the story we see a father who lives differently. See, I believe in your life you do not want to be unresponsive to what God is calling you to do. I believe that you are people who look more like the Father and less like the disciples in this moment. In fact, I want to go back to the story one last time in Matthew chapter 17. And I want you to see at the very beginning what happens. It says, when they came to the crowd, a man approached Jesus and he knelt before him. He said, hey, have mercy on my son. He has seizures. He falls into the fire. He falls into the water. And then Jesus says to Jesus, I brought him to your disciples. But they couldn't heal him. Let's work backwards for just a minute. The man brings his kid to the disciples and they couldn't heal him. What does he do? I guess I'll give up today. God doesn't care. God doesn't hear me. No, what does he do? What does the Father do in this moment? He believes that his son is worth healing. He believes that his son is worth getting help. And so he doesn't just stop with the disciples. He says, well, if I can't get his disciples to do it, I'll just go straight to the source. He is persistent. He has perseverance. He keeps showing up in this story. This is why Jesus says in Matthew chapter 7, he says, ask and it will be given to you. He says, seek and you will find it. And he says, knock and the door will be opened to you. Church, can I encourage you today? Keep asking when you don't get the answer that you want. Keep searching for God even though you may not see him in front of your face. Keep knocking on the door. Be persistent. Look like the Father. Keep showing up and approaching God and asking. And you keep banging on that door. You might be banging on the wrong one though, just letting you know. Maybe he's on the apartment over. If you're banging and there's no answer, go to the next one. But you just keep showing up. You keep knocking every single day. Church, I need to tell you, I am really a jacked up person. I really am. There are days I'm really a bad pastor. There are days I'm a bad leader. Like this week, I really screwed it up. And sometimes you just got to own it. You got to like, yeah, that was bad. That was bad. But here's the one gift I believe that God has given me. Here's the one thing that I think that I've gotten right over time. The gift that God has given me is the gift of stubbornness. Did you guys see that in the Hope Unleashed packet when you guys were filling out your gift? Did you see a stubbornness as a gift in Hope Unleashed? No? I think we should add it. Listen, if I was giving you an assessment, there would be all kinds of different things that aren't on there. Stubbornness, yeah. I don't know what else we'd put on there, but that's a good start. And I've come to realize that the stubbornness that God has given me is such a joy because if I don't get out of bed every day and put my feet to the ground, if I just stop showing up, I can't make a difference. Right? It's not always gumdrops and lollipops here at Be Hope Church. Can I let you know behind the scenes? It's a lot of work at times. We got a brand new team that we're working with. And they're amazing and they're awesome. But the reality is we're building a team. Do you know what it takes to build a team? It takes a lot. And days it's really hard. Sometimes it's like, maybe I should quit. No. We got to keep showing up. Can I let you know the Compel campaign? It scared me to death. I've never done one of these before in my life. When I was interviewing, like, you ever raise money for building? No, never done it in my life. But meeting by meeting, I just decided I'm gonna show up. If I get it wrong, who cares? I'm just gonna keep showing up. See, when I get done with life, I wanna be like Peter and John, and the way that they're described in Acts is that they were unschooled and they were ordinary, but people were astonished because they'd been with Jesus. I want people to look at my life when I'm done, and if the only thing that you can say about me is that he kept showing up every single day, and you were astonished because God was with him every step of the way, then my life will be a success. And this is what I want for you, is that every day you would keep showing up. When the devil's got your back up against the wall, church, you need to keep showing up. When you feel like God is absent, even though he's present, guess what you need to do, church? You keep showing up. When you ask prayers and you're not getting the answers that you want from God, guess what you need to do? You need to keep showing up. Come on, my students are getting it. If you relapse one more time and you want to lean into the disappointment instead of overcoming the addiction by stepping up every single week coming to CR, you just gotta what? Keep showing up. You can let the distortion of your mind tell you that you should be in isolation when the reality is God wants you in community, which is why every single weekend you need to keep showing up. Because when you show up, church, you are living by faith, and when you show up, church, you become dangerous people. I need you to hear this today. You may not think your presence today is a big deal, but just by showing up in this moment, you are alerting the powers and the principalities and the evil of this world that God is not done with me yet. There is still work to do. There is healing to be had. There is hope to be found. There is freedom that is in front of me. There is forgiveness that is on the horizon. There is hope that needs to be unleashed. Church, when we step up, when we keep showing up, we live with a faith that is so dangerous that we become unstoppable to the enemy that tries to get in our way every single day. You keep stepping. You keep moving. You keep showing up. You live the dangerous life that God has called you to right now, every single day, and watch how much fun you'll have with the faith that God has given you. I'm ending right here. Right here. This is it. I love the verse in Hebrews chapter 4, verse 16. This is what it says. I want you to say this with me, church. Let's put it up there, verse 16. Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive the mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. What does it say? Approach. Approach God with confidence. How did the Father approach God? With confidence. Some of you, you don't believe that you're worthy of God's grace. Some of you don't believe that you're worthy of his love. You don't believe that you should be standing in front of him. And I want to tell you today that God believes in you so much that the greatest thing you can do is show up before his feet and experience the grace that he wants to offer you. Would you stand with me in this moment? I want to pray over your life. God, we come to you right now, and we don't come in weak. We don't come in tired, but right now we come into this place confident. We approach you with the kind of confidence that you are calling us to live with. And that today, as we ask for your mercy on our lives, we would receive your grace, not by belief, but by our faith. God, I pray that you would make us dangerous people. I pray today that when we feel like giving up and stepping out, that we would just keep stepping in, that we would keep going down the dark valley that you're leading us to. And so God, we put our trust in you. We put our life in you. We put our faith in you. And as your people, we'll make one more move to change the world. And it's in the powerful name of Jesus we pray this. Amen.